Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So tonight I have more of an advanced lesson for anybody trying to add realism to the drawings, but also make it seem like their subject matter, whether it's an animal, creature, or human, living and breathing within the atmosphere that they are drawing. The tools that I'm using are quite simple. It is, or they are, black Prismacolor, which you can see here on the sugar glider that I've been drawing, and then a 4B pencil. So it's just these two, and we're going to be mixing these together, and I'm going to show you how I've been doing the fine fur on this little critter, but also I want to show you a technique that I have spent years developing to make it look like the creatures and animals are living within mist or within moisture and atmosphere. All right, so first things first, I'm going to show you how I achieved all this smoothness going on. And that is, I'm lightly holding my pencil, sharpened by the way. Always keep your pencil sharp. And I'm going to say this in every single one of my videos where I explain it. Dull pencils make dull drawings. So make sure that you keep these sharp. And then the second thing that you should think about is whenever you're applying these strokes, commit to it. If you constantly shade and lift your pencil off the page, put it back down, continue to shade, lift it up, put it back down. Whenever you place it back down, you're going over the previous spot that you're shading, creating a darker line. So you may think that you're doing a good job, but then it ends up looking like crap because you're going to have a lot of streaks in there that are darker. So always start light and then commit to the entire duration of where you want to shade. Now you can see a lot of white parts in here, or cream color because this is moleskin. I'm letting the paper tone do the work for me. In this case, since there's fur, what I'm going to do is I have this Prismacolor outline for the darker fur, and I'm just going to take my graphite and slowly but surely run some really fine-tuned shading marks across the edges of it. And what that does is it creates a fuzziness. So if, or those of you watching right now, maybe you're drawing a cat or a dog or some kind of animal or creature with very fine hair or fur, this will really help it look like lighter fur is bleeding into the darker fur, and then it's nice and smooth. That's how I got this texture up here. So when you look on the sugar glider's head, this is all black Prismacolor because you can tell that the texture is different. But on the edges here, the fur isn't finished yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use tiny controlled ovals, and I'm going to lightly place those on the edge, and I might have to hold my pencil a little differently. Like this, and then you're going to have it go into the white part of the page. It's going to take some patience. So those of you that you don't have any patience, this is going to be the ultimate test for you. And then I'm just going to go in a different direction. Notice how I'm not turning the page or the sketchbook a lot for this. I usually would for a larger area, but I can kind of turn my hand a little bit just to get these tiny little areas. And I'm just going to fade off some very light lines on the edge, and it's going to look like the fuzziness is continued throughout the white fur too. There you go. Sugar gliders are so cute. They're also pretty fascinating. They don't fly, they glide when they jump. They're almost like flying squirrels. Strange little things. Strange little things, but they're adorable. Okay, so that's one trick that I like using for the fur. Now you can see down here, this is a little different. It's stronger, darker spots of fur coming out of the light part. I'm actually going to leave that because if I keep working on that, I'm going to screw it up, and I don't want to. This is one of the hardest parts about being an artist, and that is knowing when to stop, because we just want to keep going. So knowing when to stop is very, very powerful. But one area that I do want to focus on is this. Now, this probably looks familiar to some of you who begin shading and you have these strokes showing up and you don't know how to get rid of them because one's dark, one's light, one's dark, they're zigzagged. I'm going to show you how to do it. You saw those original black lines going across. So I'm going to press a little harder. I'm going to use some ovals, and I'm going to release the pressure as I move back up into the arm. Like this. Now the original black stroke is black Prismacolor. I'm going over it with graphite because it mixes very well. Okay, now I'm going to turn my hand slightly and I'm going to go in a different direction. You can see how it's starting to get pretty smooth. Now let's say I want to fade the edges off. I'm going to do exactly what I did up here to the head, and I'm going to, for lack of better words, I'm going to walk the graphite down until it smooths out the outline of the black. And there you have it, folks. It's very subtle, but it definitely works. And notice I did not use my finger. Don't use your finger to shade. That's not shading. There you go. And then I want to kind of even out some of these areas that may be a little too wonky. You know, some of these marks are not, they're not supposed to look like that. So let's just smooth these out a little bit. There we go. I get some of that shade and the shadow showing right up underneath that eye. Okay, now there are some details within this fur where if you keep your pencil sharp like this, you can make very tiny strokes coming across that light part. And the same thing over here. Let me zoom in so you can see this. Okay, so now that we're zoomed in, you can kind of see more of the detail here and how I was doing tiny little ovals to fade in the white part and then the black part, because sugar gliders have those really neat body stripes going across their bodies. So I'm going to be looking up at this fur on the head, and I'm just going to be applying very tiny light markings to show the fur. Now, those of you that are drawing right now and you're doing an animal, maybe your pet or you're just making up a creature, it is very crucial to have the hair or the fur grow in a certain direction on the body. This is where it helps by looking at reference. Okay, I did not make the sugar glider up in my head. On my computer screen over here on my right, I probably have about 6 or 7 sugar glider photographs, all in different positions. Now I made this position up, but I'm looking at the sugar gliders and I'm seeing how their hair looks, the way that the fur grows on the head. Notice how all the strokes are going down towards the chin. So think about how fur will grow on the creatures that you guys are drawing too. Keep it very light, very, very light. And if you're happy with the direction, then you can press a little hard. I know that paper's moving, sorry. That's probably annoying when I push on it and the paper moves. Now there are some spots like around the eye here where I might have to apply some darker lines for the fur coming out, because I have to imagine that all of the fur is going to be growing down here. Some of the photographs that I'm looking at, the fur does in fact grow downwards towards the nose. But up here on the head, you know, sugar gliders have that little part line too. It's that tuft of fur right here, and it's inside of that. But it's so black you won't be able to see my graphite over top of it. So I'm just putting in some tiny little fur marks. There we go. And then there are some areas like this where I want to keep the white of the hand grabbing the branch, but I want to put some shadow on the jaw. See how black that shadow is on the jaw? I'm not going to erase it because I don't want to erase, so I'm just going to use darker lines. Maybe there's a harsher shadow right there, and then I'm just going to fade it up into the jaw, and that looks better already. So I'm just going to keep that up. And then I'm just going to look at the nose here and be like, okay, I mean, based on what I see, there's not a lot of harsh lighting on this critter. It's more of like an overcast day, so even the plants around it probably are not going to be casting a shadow against it. I could get a little darker inside the ears here, but I think for the most part, the black Prismacolor of the eyeballs and here really stood out. Okay. Now remember, a little side note for all of you illustrators watching me and people finalizing your concepts in a final piece, there is importance in playing up contrast within each other. So for example, look how black those eyeballs are on the sugar glider. That's with the black Prismacolor. But I also used black Prismacolor on the fur, but you can tell the difference between the two. This is very subtle, so subtleties go a long way in this. Alright, so we're going to zoom out, and then I'm going to show you some atmospheric perspective tricks. And this is a little bit more advanced, but if you practice this at least once a day for an hour, maybe 2 hours, you're going to get good at this pretty quickly. Okay, so a spot that I can put some atmospheric perspective in is right around here and probably parts of the tail. Now let me explain what atmospheric perspective actually is. Atmospheric perspective is the combination of light and it's a combination of moisture within the atmosphere in order to create depth within the subject matter. Now the definition could probably be much longer, but that is the shortest answer that you can give and still understand it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to travel down this back, and you can see the outline that I have given this creature. Okay, the hair is so fine here that it probably would create a pretty decent outline, and I just have to be careful that it's not too dark. However, look down here at the tail. Can you see all the fuzziness going on and there's not a lot of outline? That's where you can take advantage of atmospheric perspective. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pencil and very lightly I'm going to apply shading going outside of the creature into the atmosphere, like this. Now at first, if you are not used to this, by the way, I'm so sorry, behind this, there's like pencil drawings and stuff. You can see like this big disgusting creature, and then over here is pencil. This paper is thinner than most moleskin, so please ignore if you can see through it. So what you'll do is you're going to apply that shading going up into the atmosphere, but we're not done yet. We're going to turn the page like this. Make sure it's still in focus. Okay, now you can see the fuzziness of the tail. So I'm going to apply that same darkness as you can see on that tail, and I'm going to bring it up into the atmosphere too. So what's happening is we're losing the edge of the tail, but we're still seeing the edge of the back and then the rest of the tail coming out. But we're not done. So we're going to turn the sketchbook again, like so, and we're going to hit it with the third direction. We're going to try to go a direction that we haven't been because you can still see the pencil strokes. So the edge of this back stops abruptly right there, and I don't like that. So I'm just going to make this a little fuzzier than normal, and I'm going to bring that fuzziness out into the atmosphere, just floating freely, like this. Turn the page back around. Now, we only did one spot, so you can imagine what would happen if you would do this to numerous spots. So for example, what happens if we look at underneath the ear right here? Okay, can you see underneath the ear? And then you can see the cheek. The ear is outlined nicely, the cheek is outlined nicely, but there's a tuft of fur coming off in between the eyeball and the earlobe. I'm going to take advantage of that, and I'm very lightly going to apply some shading, just flowing freely, blah, right out into the air. I'm not pushing harder, I'm actually releasing pressure. I'm going to do the same thing at a different angle. So it looks like my pencil strokes went up at like a 45-degree angle. So I'm going to go across this at the opposite direction, and I'm just going to commit to it and release pressure. We're not done yet though. We need to honor this, and we need to make it as smooth as possible. So I'm just going to go almost vertically. And I'm going to open that up, and it's going to fade off into the trees, the leaves, or whatever's out there. Okay, so now it looks, it's almost like sfumato. If you guys aren't familiar with what sfumato is, it's a term used a lot in painting where there's a smoky effect, like a smokeness effect, and if there's darkness happening in the background, it just means there's like a gradual tonal change without any harsh outlines. That's essentially what it is. Now, this is bringing the atmosphere into where the sugar glider is standing, or grabbing the branch. And I actually could apply it again in several other parts that aren't really finished yet. So for example, Down here towards the bottom of the sugar glider, I can just bring out some of the shading and then release pressure. And then if I want to feel adventurous, I can go up here to the ear. Now I like the ear and I don't need to ruin anything on the ear, so I'm just going to lightly put in some smoky effect right around that black Prismacolor, and I'm just going to fade it off into the background. So now it looks like part of the ear is traveling through some mist or smoke. And I see another soft spot right here that I did not plan on it ever having atmospheric perspective in it. It's just like a happy accident. So I'm just going to fade that off, but I don't want to overdo it. There we go. So that's how I would do it, folks. If you're doing something similar to where you have all of the details on the subject, but hardly anything over there near the rocks or roots or whatever you're drawing your creatures on, I would leave that unless you want to illustrate the whole thing. That's not your focal point though. The creature is. So if you're doing a character, a creature, an animal, that's your focal point. Don't confuse the two by trying to shade everything, because one, there's no point. You're overworking the image. And two, you got to learn how to self-edit and hold back. Okay. Holding back is one of the hardest things to do in art. Man, I totally get it. Like we become emotionally attached to what we're doing. We want to make it as beautiful as possible. And what happens when we become emotionally attached to our work? We overwork it and then we screw it up. And then the rest is history. Okay, so hopefully you learned a lot about this. This is a little bit more advanced, but you know what? You're going to get there, folks. So I'm covering the whole aspects. We're doing basics on this channel. We're doing intermediate art. And then we're also doing sketches where you've reached that level where you can make stuff look realistic. So comment below if you enjoyed this. Let me know what you want me to do in the future, because I love reading those comments. And if you're struggling in art right now, please know that you will reach this level. You will. But you have to stop telling yourself that you won't. Otherwise, you won't. So, with that said, thanks for tuning in. See you next time. Peace.